38 litres full. At about 55 litres, it will come out the composite vent filter and it can destroy the whole system. Okay, so that's why we never open it, and it has this little white, this yellow cover on. Here we have valve 1 and valve 2 up here, and these should always be open unless we're doing the emergency bypass, at which point we should shut them off into the closed position. Yeah. Here we have our flow sensor. What's that measuring? What are we measuring in the flow sensor?
The flow rate to the of product.
Yeah, flow rate of the product. So the permeate water from the RO. So typically it might be 1 litre, 1.5 litres a minute. Yeah. Okay. So that's it in terms of kind of the technologies down below. In terms of up here then, power comes in, goes through this. What's that?
EMI.
EMI, in the UK we call it like a Schaffner, so power module. From there it comes into the power supply. From the power supply it comes to this main PCB. Okay, this PCB is in charge of the main P1 motor. Okay, so when you're working on the unit, okay, here is safe, but this one is mains voltage. Yeah, so please don't touch that one. Okay, again, if the system's running, don't plug in the motor because you'll arc it. And likewise, these pins here, I think there's 6, 6 pins. That's mains voltage going to sort of 24 and 48 volts on the main PCB. Okay, so if, for example, your screwdriver touches those, it will likely to go bang. Okay, so just be mindful. This is mains voltage. Here is sort of 24 or 48 volts. Okay. One thing I see service engineers do quite often is they'll come along with their paperwork and they can put it up there, or even leave it on the power supply. Okay, the power supply is trying to emit heat, okay, all the time. So if you block it up, okay, within an hour or so, that will also go bang. Okay, so just be mindful. I often see service engineers put paperwork up there. During commission, it falls on, they walk away for lunch, come back, and the power supply is exploded. Okay, so just be mindful. Here is our ballast board. What's that doing?
UV ballast.
UV ballast. Okay, we have 2 types of UV ballast. So the Medica and Medica Pro, it's an 8 watt UV ballast, but for the option Q, and the Sentra 6120, it's 14 watts. Okay, so they look very similar, but they do 2 different functions. Okay, so the way to tell is on these old ballast boards, it will have a number 8 or number 14. So 8 watts or 14. They look almost identical. Okay, so if you ever replace it, just have a quick look at that number and just make sure it's the correct number. The little fan?
Yes.
So with the 14 watt version, they always have a small fan that's helping to draw out basically the heat, in essence, to stop it from cooking. Yeah? So that's that. Here we've got some connections. All of these connections here can be removed, and they're typically for things like V1, V2, P1, not P1, P2, and we know because on here it will have a small piece of label which will tell us what it goes off to. So it's labelled here, and if we check down the bottom where that cable goes, it should be labelled down the bottom. So it's an easy way to tell where the wires go. Okay?
James, if I want to replace the breath cap tank, we need under this, right?
Yeah.
To remove all.
Yeah, yeah. So that brake tank that Mr. Tam has given us one.
No, the cap here.
Cap.
Oh, the cap.
Breath cap.
Breath cap.
Well, the one under here.
Yeah. It's difficult.
It's difficult. Yeah, I was going to say
Because there is a case leaking from
the
breath cap.
So we replace it.
Okay. Have you already replaced it?
Already, me by just below this, not open,
Not open this.
all. Yeah.
Okay. It's gonna, I would be surprised if it leaks. So on the brake tank, this is what we've got. Okay. So 7.5 litres roughly. It has two level switches. One goes up and one goes down. And then we have our ball float valve internally. Okay. One thing that's very useful is here
Yeah.
is we have a small strainer and we can see it's okay. It's not totally blocked, but it's not brilliant either. Okay. This is something to have a look at once a year. So when you take it apart, have a quick look in there and you give that a clean. If it's still blocking, you can take it out by undoing basically the nut, and you need a small hand to basically pull it through. This here has the older white ball float valve. Okay, so they're okay, but they're good to about 35, sort of 40 degrees. Okay, the black ones are much higher, and
50.
they're good for about 50 degrees. Okay, typically. Once this is in place, it has, as you can see here, basically an overflow device. So if, for whatever reason, the water comes up, it will overflow out, it will leak onto the bottom of the product.
Leak sensor.
And here we have two leak sensors, so it should cut out the system. Okay. These are quite hard to take out because they're silicone glued into place, in
glue.
position. So if you ever have to take one out,
Never.
it's glued in, if that makes sense. So you would need some new silicone glue to put it in properly. Yeah, silicone. Okay. On this one, we also have some fuses here. So we have a small 5 amp micro fuse. Okay, that small 5 amp micro fuse is for the recirculation pump. What you often find when they leak, like this one did the other day in Singapore, it can quite often take out the micro fuse. So if you then go put a new one in and it still doesn't work, your first check is that micro fuse. And that micro fuse is the same as what's on the Flex and Chorus. It's the same 5 amp fuse, okay? The other two fuses are to protect the motors and basically the inlet solenoid valves and those kind of things. Yeah?
Pump, circulation.
The one for the recirculation is often the one that will fail. If anything's going to fail, it will be often that one. Okay? What we've also got here then, we've got the water quality sensors, temperature sensors. Here we have the DI tag connections. Here we have our 3-volt battery that we talked about this week quite a lot. We also have, to answer one of your questions, we do have a start-stop button, but we also have a small micro switch under here. Okay, so if you can't get your hand to the back, because these systems are often wall mounted, if you get your finger in very smallly, okay, here there's a small micro switch. If you press it, it will restart the system, like a reboot. So,
Without pressing the 2 fingers?
no, so that's just
Switch.
It's that's a factory reset. This is just basically, if the product's on, press it, it will basically recycle the product, so switch it back on, if that makes sense. So it's very small, but it's about here. You need very small hands to go through underneath. That's it, yep. Yeah, small.
When I need to do that, in what situation?
So it would be, if it's wall mounted, if you can't get your hand to back here to just switch it off and switch it on, you can just go in there, for example. That's why we did it. In terms of the prongs then that come down for the data tags, please do not pull on those two basically prongs, okay? If we're getting that alarm code that we talked about today, a simple software fix will solve it. So it's the same for the Protect as well as the DI packs. If you're getting alarms all the time, it's because of the software, okay? So the old software from 3 years ago is checking the Protect and the DI pack about 20 times every second, okay? The new one, version of software, is exactly the same. We've changed very little else. All it does is it checks the Protex in place on day one, and it checks for it every so often, once a week, just to make sure it's still there. So that will get rid of, I'm 99% sure, all the things that we discussed today. So it's nothing to do with the prongs, it's nothing to do with pulling them tighter, it's nothing to do often with the chips on the Protex. Yeah? Cool. Any questions on this system?
Is it quite difficult to test about the balancing of the pump, right, Mr. James?
Is it?
Because we have a small